Okay, now let's continue with chapter 2 about the controlling faculties. And in this lecture, we will talk about the dhammas dissociated from the mind, as we have learned those mental events that are associated with mind and other mental events that they arise together. Then we continue with other factors that belong to the formations, okay, that belong to the aggregated formations. So we're going to have 14 dissociated factors. After that, we will continue with the 6 causes, the 5 effects, and the 4 conditions, which we very often encounter them in the text of Buddhism. So it will help us understand the text and help us understand with the meanings, of course. So we will start with this. The 14 factors are dissociated from the mind. The first 2 are the possession and non-possession. So the first thing is, why are they called dhammas dissociated from the mind? Well, they are not categorized as rupa. They're not material, of course, and also they're not other factors. They are just included in. They're not mental events. They're not unconditioned factors. They're not the mind. So there are other factors that are included in the aggregation of formations. These 14, although they are dissociated from the mind, but they all belong to sentient beings. So this is very important to remember. The first 2 are a group, which are possession and non-possession. These 2 are actually concepts very important for subdividing theories. And then we have sameness, we have non-conception samapatti, and cessation samapatti. We have life, and then these 4 characteristics of conditioned factors: birth, continuance, age, and termination. And then 3 components of the languages, that are the names, phrases, and syllables. According to Sabstivada, all these have real entities, while according to Sautrantika and the schools above, they would say that no, they don't. So let's first take a look at possession, because this system of or this theory of possession and non-possession, or in Sanskrit they call it prapti and aprapti. They're very special doctrinal establishment in Sabstivada. So by definition, what is prapti? What is a possession? It is a dissociated formation that enables an acquired dharma to be possessed by a given pudgala. It's something like you tie a basket of goods on the shoulder of an ox. You need that tie to make sure you don't lose that basket of goods. It's something like this. And we have 2 types of possession: acquisition, or by acquisition, or by accompaniment. Acquisition means either through the first time acquisition, something that you have not attained it before. For example, the possession of supramundane dhammas. Supramundane dhammas at the very first moment of the past vision. That is the very moment when an ordinary being becomes a noble being. So the supramundane dhammas, this pudgala has never attained before, and now he has attained it. So that's the first time acquisition of these factors. And this is the first type of possession via acquisition. Another example could be that one day you get an AI assistant for the very first time. So you have never attained that before, but today you got it. So that's the first time acquisition. And another kind of is reacquisition. It's something that you have lost it before, but then you have required it again. For example, the property of or the possession of good factors of samapatti, arising again in a desire realm, Pudgala. For example, you have cultivated the first dhyana meditation, but after a while, for some reasons, you lost it, and then you you make efforts, you start with some preparatory actions, and in a later time you have regained this first dhyana meditation. Therefore, you have reacquired, and that kind of possession is called possession via reacquisition. And possession via accompaniment. It means of that which has already been acquired and has not been lost. It's a status more. It's more like a status. It's a period between which you possess that thing or that dharma, and you have not lost it. It's there. So we also have two kinds: either continuing accompaniment, like it's beginning from the second moment onwards. For example, you have acquired a super mundane dharma at the very first moment you become a noble being, or you have acquired something that for the very first time, and from the second moment on, you will have this possession via continuing accompaniment. It's still there. You haven't lost it. And then you can also have this innate accompaniment, possession by innate accompaniment. For example, the defilements exist in Bhavagra. It has always been there with ordinary beings. Because it has never been abandoned before. And once a Pudgala, once a sentient being has abandoned such defilements existing in Bhavagra, he's no longer an ordinary being anymore. He has become a noble being. Because those defilements can only be abandoned by pure factors. So that's called possession via innate accompaniment, and can only be abandoned together with that dharma, for example, with those defilements in Bhavagra. Next thing we need to know is that this possession pertains exclusively to one's own continuum. You cannot have possession that belongs to other people. That is impossible. And when we talk about the moral nature, a possession is either good or bad or non-defined. And it is consistent with the Dharma acquired. If you acquire a Dharma in the desire realm, the possession also belongs to the desire realm. If you acquire a dhyana meditation, then the possession belongs to the form realm, and so on. So it belongs to a realm where the possessed dharma is located for all impure factors. If it is pure factors, that's another case, because possession of a pure factors, it doesn't belong to any realm. It's beyond all realms. And there is no possession for space. It's impossible for you to acquire space. Next, let's take a look at the non-possession. Well, by definition, a non-possession is a dissociated formation that prevents a dharma from being possessed by a given Pudgala. It is also classified into two types. The first type is called all-time non-possession, meaning that the dharma would never be acquired again. For example, the non-possession of the defilements to be abandoned by vision at the 16th moment of the passive vision. So at the 16th moment of the passive vision, those defilements to be abandoned by the passive vision will be abandoned and have been abandoned forever. You will not arise those defilements again. It's gone and gone forever. So then you will have this non-possession of those defilements. A second type would be the temporary non-possession, which is temporarily not possessed, but you might still get it in a later time. For example, the first moment after the loss of dhyana meditation, well, after some practice, you may still get it back. And it can be re-obtained with some effort. So that's a temporary non-possession. Also, this non-possession pertains exclusively to one's own continuum. You cannot have non-possession that belongs to other people. Non-possession is unobscured and non-defined in nature, and it always follows the Pudgala's body. The location where you are now, those non-possessions you have will be there as well. So we need to answer a question: why non-possession is unobscured and non-defined in nature? Well, first of all, they cannot be good. They cannot be good in nature. If non-possession of good factors is also good, then those who have cut off their good roots will have this non-possession of good roots, but it is still good in nature, meaning that those who have cut off good roots still have some good factors. It doesn't make sense. Also, non-possession can never be defiled. For example, if non-possession of a bad factors is also bad, then those noble beings like an arhat who have already abandoned all defilements and have abandoned all bad actions still have bad factors because he has non-possession of the bad factors, and that also makes no sense. And about the two types, this question, we need to ask this question: how to abandon the nature of an ordinary worldling? In other words, how can an ordinary being abandon his nature as an ordinary being? That is to say, how can he get rid of the non-possession of the noble path? Because once a being once a noble being possesses the noble path, well then he's a noble being, he's not an ordinary being. So the question is, how can an ordinary being abandon that kind of non-possession? Well, the answer is that there are two types of abandonment when it comes to the nature of an ordinary being. The first one is, of course, the abandonment forever. That is by entering into the noble path, meaning by converting oneself from an ordinary being to a noble being. Well, then you are no longer an ordinary being, and you will not be an ordinary being forever. Never ever. You will never be an ordinary being again. And for example, you do that by entering the path of vision or path of cultivation and so on. Then you have abandoned the nature of an ordinary being forever. And another type is, for example, temporary abandonment by transmigration. And that will also abandon the nature of an ordinary being in its previous dhatu. For example, if an ordinary being, let's say a human in Kama dhatu, in the desire realm, and when he dies, he gets reborn into the first dhyana in the form dhatu. Okay, then we will say he has lost the nature of an ordinary being as a human in the desire realm temporarily by obtaining by being reborn into the first dhyana. This is also like when a being in Bhavagra dies and gets reborn in the Rupa Dhatu, he will lose the nature of an ordinary being in the Bhavagra temporarily because of the rebirth into the Rupa Dhatu. So there are two types of abandonment: forever as like permanently or temporarily. The next dissociated factor that belongs to the aggregated formations is sameness. According to Mahavibhasha, sameness is also unobscured and undefined in nature. And by definition, it is a dharma or factor that causes resemblance or homogeneity among beings. For example, to share similar conduct, similar volition, and so on. And of course, we also have similarities among non-beings. Like we have very similar houses, very similar cars, but that's not the similarity or sameness we talk about here. Here we talk about the sameness among sentient beings. So it belongs to sentient beings. And we have two types of sameness, the general or the particular. A general sameness, for example, is a factor that renders all sentient beings alike. Like we all live in the three realms, we all have consciousness, something like this. And a particular sameness could be many varieties, each occurring in a certain group of beings based on their place, their mode of birth, and so on. For instance, we are all humans, and those are all birds. They are all ordained monks, and you are all members of the Kamatashlin Buddhist Center in Oslo. So there you can find a sameness to make us all humans, or to make them all birds, or things like this. So it applies to specific. It applies to specific groups. We can actually also do a fourfold analysis in relation to transmigration and sameness when the being dies and gets reborn. So the first group is that the beings transmigrate without abandoning sameness. For instance, a human dies and is reborn again in the human realm. So he transmigrates, of course, but the sameness is maintained. It's still human. The next one is abandon sameness without transmigration. For example, an ordinary being becomes a noble being in the same lifetime. He hasn't died. He's still alive, so there is no transmigration. But he has become a noble being now, so he has abandoned the sameness as an ordinary being. And also, one can transmigrate and abandon sameness as well. For example, a human dies and is reborn in the Deva realm. So he dies and gets reborn, so obviously there is a transmigration. And he has also abandoned the sameness as a human. And the last circumstance is that neither transmigration nor abandoning sameness. For example, a human continues living an ordinary human life like what we are now. We are human and we're still human and we're not dying yet. So there is no transmigration yet, and we haven't abandoned this sameness as human. Vasubandhu and Sautrantika actually, they do not acknowledge any real entity of sameness. These are just the concept. Next dissociated factor is non-conception. By definition, it's a state of non-conception is a factor that causes the cessation of all mind and mental events. So the mind and the mental events, they're gone temporarily, they won't work, and it's exclusively a ripened effect produced by the non-conception samapatti. And beings in such a state they live in an elevated region in Bhattaphalas, in the fourth dhyana, in the Rupadhatu. So their life expectancy is 500 eons, but it is not fixed because premature death can still occur. So next question is, would they be entirely mindless throughout their lives? And the answer is no, because they will need a mind at the moment of rebirth into this non-conception place in the fourth dhyana. Without such a mind, the rebirth will not be able to happen. And also they will need a mind when the lifespan has come to its end, when it's time to transmigrate. So of course there is also a mind at the moment of death, so they can transmigrate. And then the next question is, where are they going to transmigrate after death? Well, the answer is they will transmigrate back to the desire realm, the Kamadhatu. And they will die like arrows shot into the air, quickly fall into the ground again when the momentum of the arrow is exhausted. The momentum, by saying the momentum, we mean that the meditative power from the previous non-conception samapati they have accumulated, they have cultivated in their previous life. And because that they will come back to the desire realm, and one of the worst cases would be because this non-conception and the cause, the non-conception samapati, are only practiced by outsiders. So one of the worst cases for outsiders is actually arising false views when they die from this non-conception. And that will drag them to miserable destinies. That will make them the unfortunate beings and suffer. And the reason why they're going to come back, the main reason is that there is no accumulation. There's no opportunity to further accumulate good dharmas due to cessation of the mind and mental events. Because how can you accumulate good factors without mind and mental events? And actually, according to the preliminary practices of the Great Perfection, the very famous book written by Chap.2, the Chap.2 Rinpoche in Tibet, this is one of the 8 scenarios or 8 cases or 8 circumstances where cultivation of the path towards liberation is absolutely impossible. Therefore, not for Buddhist practitioners, not for noble beings. Buddhist practitioners and noble beings, they will never practice the non-conception samapati in order to be reborn into this non-conception in the fourth dhyana. Because this is a total waste of time with also huge risk of falling. Next, let's take a look at further on the non-conception samapati as we have explained. It is the cause for the non-conception in the fourth dhyana. If you cultivate this samapati in the next life, you will definitely be reborn into the non-conception in the fourth dhyana. So by definition, it is a fact that brings about the complete cessation of all mind and mental events. As we said, it is the cause for the state of non-conception and the rebirth into Padesha in Bhafalas. The Padesha means a separate region, and the Bhafalas is the highest place in the fourth dhyana for ordinary beings. This samapati relies on the fourth dhyana, meaning you have to cultivate the fourth dhyana first before you can cultivate this non-conception samapati. The motivation, however, is good. It's a desire, it's driven by a desire for deliverance or liberation. Well, some outsiders, they don't know how to practice the real path, the noble path as guided by Buddha. So they went to some wrong path, some paths like this. So but also they have very good will. They want to be delivered. They want to have a liberation. So with a very good motivation, it makes the moral quality of this samapati also good. Just unfortunately, they will not arrive liberation. The type of retribution is the karmic cause for subsequent rebirth, meaning if you cultivate non-conception samapati and if you have succeeded, then in the next life, right in the next life, you will be reborn in the fourth dhyana, in the non-conception place in the fourth dhyana. The first time for this non-conception samapati to arise, it can be either in the desire realm or in the form realm. And who can practice it? Who will practice it? It will only be practiced by ordinary beings only, and actually it will only be practiced by outsiders, not by noble ones, as I have explained. Why? And why is it called non-conception samapatti? According to Samgabhadra, the samapatti arises with a dislike on conception. So it's called non-conception samapatti because the practitioners dislike conception. However, they do not dislike sensations. Actually, ordinary beings do not dislike sensations. Why? Because very often they obtain meditation or samapattis only due to or mainly due to their attachment to sensations. They think that the sensations in a meditative attainment is much better than the sensations in our daily life. Okay, let's continue with the next one, which is cessation samapatti. By definition, it's a factor that causes all mind and mental events to be completely exhausted or extinguished. Well, that sounds similar to the non-conception samapatti, but they do have a lot of differences. For example, this cessation samapatti relies not on the fourth dhyana, but on the concentration or sphere of the bhavagra. And the motivation is also a bit different. The motivation is the intent to extinguish both sensations and conception. And the moral quality is of course also good, and it's only practiced actually by noble beings. The type of retribution is different from that of the non-conception samapatti, because if you practice this cessation samapatti, you might get reborn into the bhavagra in the next life, or maybe many lives from now, or it becomes an indeterminate action that you will not be reborn in bhavagra at all. And the reason is it is practiced only by noble beings. And if that noble being achieves or obtains arhathood, he becomes a perfected noble being, then he will of course not be reborn into bhavagra at all. An arhat, after he dies, will enter nirvana. And ordinary beings are not capable of giving rise to this samapatti. And the first time this cessation samapatti arises is only among human beings. I also want to share that although only the noble beings can give rise to this samapatti, the samapatti itself is impure. And according to Khenpo Sodaji, this samapatti is good in nature, of course, with a very good motivation as well, but it is not very much, but it doesn't have much merit in it. The reason he says this is from the perspective of real detachment from samsara, the renunciation the renunciation, mind of renunciation, or the bodhicitta, the buddhi mind. There is a lack of such a renunciation or bodhicitta that is in this samapatti. So it is an intent not yet beyond samsara. And mostly the noble beings, why do they practice this? They practice this mainly to take a break. They want to take a break. So, and why ordinary beings are not capable of cultivating this or giving rise to it? Because ordinary beings, they're in lack of noble path, and they have fear of extinction. They might think that, okay, if I practice this cessation samapatti, my mind and mental events will be extinguished. And when I get reborn into bhavagra, my body will also disappear. So how can that be without body and without mind? Then I disappear forever. That sounds really scary. So they are afraid they won't practice this cessation samapatti, mostly because of this reason. Okay, now let's take a look at the next one. The next dissociated factor is life. So what is life? It is the lifespan within the 3 realms, and it is also the life faculty among the 22 faculties. In desire realm or form realm, this life faculty supports the bodily heat and the consciousness, which we do have some experience. For example, we know that when a person dies, his body gets cold, but because the life faculty is gone. And in the formless realm, however, this life supports the consciousness only, because there is no form, no material, there is no body in the formless realm. We can actually do a 4-fold analysis of death due to exhaustion of lifespan or merit. The first kind is that the lifespan has exhausted, while the merits, there is still some merit remaining. In that case, death is inevitable because lifespan has exhausted. It is time to die. And the second group is lifespan remaining, but the merit has exhausted. And in this case, death is possible, but it is also possible to prevent death by supplementing or cultivating some merits, some good roots in some ways. So the lifespan might be extended, and the lifespan also the lifespan is remaining, just the merit exhausted. So by supplementing the merit, death could be avoided. But of course, death is also possible. And the third group is both lifespan and merit exhausted. Well, in that case, needless to say, death is inevitable. It doesn't help with whatever. It doesn't help with whatsoever, right? And the fourth group is that both lifespan and merit remaining. Well, in this case, some sudden accidental death is still possible, although this person's lifespan and merit still remains. For example, overeating, or excess of food, that may still cause some accidental death. Okay, next we will continue with characteristics of conditioned dharmas, and then the components of languages, before we start to share about the causes, effects, and conditions.